It is now my pleasure to welcome to the podium Ryan Bruce, BC Government Relations Director for CLAC, to introduce our luncheon panel moderator.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be gathered here at another great conference in the north, the BC Natural Resource Forum. Great to be gathered with you this afternoon on the traditional territory of the Lheidli, and appreciate the welcoming to the territory. Just a little bit about CLAC. CLAC's a multi-sector independent union. We represent about 60,000 men and women across Canada, working in all facets of the Canadian economy. Closer to home here, our members have been building some of the largest infrastructure projects in the country. Many of those projects, as you all know, have been discussed and talked about and dreamed about at this very conference. And I guess I just want to, on behalf of our members, thank all of you, thank the leadership of those who've brought this conference together for your continued focus and drive towards getting projects off the ground, because I have a unique vantage point working alongside our members and seeing the benefit that they, that they realize through employment, through the jobs and building these projects, family supporting, community supporting jobs. And without many of you here who have stayed focused on getting those projects off the ground, that wouldn't be possible. So on behalf of our members, I want to thank you all very much. And I look forward to continuing the discussion and creating a bright future for all British Columbians. I have the distinct honor to introduce our moderator today. Is a gentleman I've gotten to know over the years. I'm going to let you read his bio, but I just wanted to share a little bit about my observations of Dallas Smith as I've gotten to know him. First of all, Dallas is the kind of guy that walks into a room every single time with a beautiful smile on his face, with a heart of gold. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He tells you what he thinks, and there's an integrity and an honesty in how he conducts himself every single day. He just shows up ready to go, and it's quite unique. I'm just chatting with Dallas. I've known him for some time, but he's living in Duncan now. He's from Campbell River initially, but living in Duncan, which is the area I grew up in. And we just kind of put it together that we've got a lot of close friends that we share from Duncan, playing on the same ball team, slow pitch at different times. But it's really nice to make those kind of connections with people you admire, and you can see the kind of work and dedication he has to his people and to making life better for many. So with that, I want to introduce our moderator, and the gregarious, the exciting, the funny Dallas Smith.
This is a little bit different for me. I've totally fooled Ryan over the years, obviously, but I appreciate that, brother. This is something we've been doing for a while now. Those of you who have heard of my podcast, Rez Dog Walkers, we really put it together in conjunction with BCNRF and BCIROC, which I hear tickets are going on sale today for BCIROC, June 3rd to 5th in Nanaimo. Sorry for the shameless plug. But one of the reasons we started Rez Dog Walkers was to just get some insight on what we talk about as Indigenous people and leaders when we talk about the development of resources, the management of resources, the protection of resources, because it's not one conversation for us. There's so many things that we need to take into consideration for our community's well-being, our ecosystem health, and our economy that need to be part of those decisions that we make. And over the last couple of years, we've really seen the word reconciliation being tossed around as a bit of a political football. And so while I don't want to try to define reconciliation or defend it to a certain extent, we brought this panel today together to just talk about some of the things that we feel we all need to talk about as human beings, as British Columbians, as Canadians. So I'm really happy to have some esteemed colleagues join me today. And if I can ask Chief Dolleen Logan, Chief John Jack, and President Kerry, Carlick to come up and join me and put on your seatbelts. I have no idea where we're going, but it's going to be a fun ride. Sorry, more shameless swag plugs.
Yeah, the big one, Dallas. There we go. Yeah, all right.
I feel like, is it the libero in volleyball who wears the one different jersey color? Yes. Was that right? John played. So, you guys want to talk about some stuff?
I guess.
Yeah.
I've really been talking for the last 2 days. I really want to thank BCNRF and C3 Alliance for giving us the opportunity to do this. I know everything's very planned and very structured, and for Sarah to take a leap of faith just to hand me a mic with no real parameters, showing how much she's grown as a CEO over the years. So before I go and ask for introductions from each of my colleagues here, I just want to put out there that BC is going through some challenges right now. But I also want to put it out there that we've been going through some challenges for a long time that we've been working through for a number of years. In First Nations governments, we go through elections every 2 to 4 years, depending on whether you have a land code or an elections code, whether you're a treaty, non-treaty, those sorts of things. We go through provincial elections every 4 years, federal elections every 4 years, and every time a party changes, we've had to try recalibrate what we're doing. But over the last 10 years, you've seen First Nations really take their place in the management of our traditional territories. We go so far beyond the little postage stamp reserves that the colonization of Canada brought us. And as we've gotten into that whole territory discussion, we're not worrying about who's in power very much anymore because it's pretty clear you got to work with us. Whether you want to develop something, whether you want to protect something, whether you want to manage something, we need to be at the table. And this is one of the great things about this conference is that's just a given here. This conference has been happening for 23 years now, and we've seen the evolution of the projects and the partnerships and the great things that we're doing. But because we don't have every little success story on the 6 o'clock news, because it's not big enough, it's not in the right urban center, it's not important enough for everybody to hear about, people think that there's no progress being made. So those are some of the myths that I want to get behind us through today's panel, is just talk about what success looks like and how many of us have been managing success and development as opposed to managing poverty and despair. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's going to take collaboration and partnerships like this conference brings. But I really want to make it clear from a First Nations perspective, and no, I don't speak for every First Nation in British Columbia. I probably should, but I don't. But it's so important that we start to hear these little stories of what's happening up in your territory, what's happening on the west coast of Vancouver Island, what's happening here in Lake Dene territory. Because all we're seeing in the media is the scariness and the myths and the despair that's really created a little bit too much momentum that's actually what's getting in the way of some of the progress that we're making right now. So, rookie. Sorry, we've been best friends for about 2 hours now because I just met him last night for the first time and he did my podcast this morning. But Kerry, you're newly elected into the position of the Tahltan government. This is your first panel, I believe I've been told. So we're not allowed, yes, please. And it's going to be the first of many because this is one of those young, driven, forward-thinking First Nations leaders that you're going to start to hear about. But why don't you just give us a little introduction and where you're from and what you're doing, and don't be shitty.
Awesome. Thank you, Dallas. Appreciate it. Kerry Carlick. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kerry Carlick. I'm the president of the Tahltan Central Government. And as Dallas has mentioned, I'm very much a rookie and an infant in politics. This is my first political position. So I spent 19 years as a fisheries manager for our nation. And then, this spring, I wanted to see some major change within our nation and some healing. And so I threw my name in the ring, and lo and behold, here I am. So I really appreciate it. And yeah, so I've been in here for about 6 months, so very new. As everyone is aware, Tahltan Nation has been very busy, making all sorts of moves and pushing the boundaries of Indigenous jurisdiction on our land. So yeah, I've come in at a very important time and really pushing things and trying to keep the good work that our nation has been doing before. So just kind of keeping that going. And yeah, it's been a huge task. So yeah, no, it's a lot of work, and really looking forward to pushing the boundaries even further. You know, as you've mentioned, there's a lot of fear-mongering kind of things going on with Indigenous rights, and you know, we're here to kind of talk about that stuff and really change that perception and, you know, make it a better future for not only our nation but BC and the whole country of Canada. So yeah, appreciate that.
Hey, first political speech, first panel. I think the province is in okay hands going forward. Now to the grizzled veteran on the team.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, these people are never going to talk to me again.
Oh, you won't get rid of me that easily. So hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Uklama Sayachat, Hishtukshitla Ho'et. My name is John Jack. My English name is John Jack. My traditional name is Sayachat. And I'm the Chief Councillor for the Hooet First Nations. And so the Hooet First Nations is located on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And we're part of the Monmouth Final Agreement, so we're a treaty First Nation. So our experience is a bit different than a lot of others, but has a lot of commonalities with a lot of what's been going on here at this conference, natural resources. I'm also the chairperson for the Alberni-Clyde Regional District, and I was just reappointed as treasurer for the First Nations Natural Gas Alliance, and yeah, very happy to be here. Thanks.
So John, I called him the grizzled veteran because he was the first, second time, third time now a guest on my podcast. So thank you. You make me more popular every time you speak. I appreciate it. I don't even know what I'm doing right now. Dolleen, save me, please.
Well, Chief Dolleen Logan, I'm elected in Lheidli today. This is my third term, and we're moving forward. It's been like what I like to call good times, because people ask me, why do I say good times? Because one day I'm going to be old and in my rocking chair thinking, why did I stress out about that? And I'm going to laugh. So now I call them good times when it's getting a little bit stressful situation. But we're moving forward. It's taken a while. We're doing step by step, and it's a team. Like I've said many times, it's our council, it's our staff, how we move forward, and our membership. It's what our membership wants, and then we have to push it through.
So let's get into this, and thank you for the introductions. You know, it's one thing to point out when fear-mongering's getting to be a challenge, but I think the way you deal with that is just by having conversations like we're about to have right now. Let's just jump right into the deep end on it right now. I was happy to hear Premier Eby came up and said he's not going to repeal DRIPA. And as much as the challenges and concerns I've had with DRIPA, I think it was a little bit prematurely introduced, but to walk away from it now would take away all those little success stories that we don't hear about. All those little things that mean something to a small municipality, a small First Nations community, a small regional district would go by the wayside if we repealed DRIPA right now. With that said, there has to be some major tools built in the toolbox to help understand how it's going to be implemented and what is it going to mean at the end of the day, and how are British Columbians going to be secure and safe in the discussions that we're having at government tables. So, John, I'll start with you. You know, you and I have probably spent hours talking about DRIPA over the 15 years of our friendship, but just some of your thoughts. Maybe you're going to tell me we should repeal it. I don't know. We didn't do much planning before this, but
I think what I'll do is I'll just repeat something that the Premier said, is that DRIPA did not establish Indigenous rights and titles. That actually already existed well before the establishment of DRIPA. The other thing that people don't seem to really understand is that DRIPA is, what do they call it, a framework piece of legislation. It's a way to get things done. I explain it as like it's not the building itself, it's the equipment that builds the building. And so how that gets interpreted, how that gets used, that's the most important thing. And so I think what we blundered into was that, and I think it's correct, a correct assessment, that the judiciary is interpreting how the act should be applied in ways that weren't originally contemplated. I see DRIPA as a partway between what usually happens in Indigenous relations, building on court cases over time, but also those court cases often just end up with a judge going, get in a room and negotiate, but this time with leverage or this time with a point. And so DRIPA was meant to create that engagement without having to have a judge every time go get in a room. And I think part of this is how we construct the action plans within DRIPA and whether and to what degree there's enough resourcing behind the actually getting it done. I think one thing that everyone's been mentioning Mark Carney's speech, so I'll do it too. He talked about variable geometry and how that is a new way of looking at the world in terms of international relations. Well, Canada has its own variable geometry, and that's the Indigenous world. That all the Indigenous relations between First Nations and with the Crown, all of those things need to be resourced appropriately so that we can communicate clearly, because that's clearly not what is happening. And so yeah, I think not repealing DRIPA is the right idea, but I do think that the original intent is to get people in a room and start talking. We can't afford to wait for more and more leverage to be piled in. First Nations need to be a part of the conversation, but they need to get themselves in the room and be willing to talk about things that are uncomfortable too. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Nice, that's great. Chief Logan, you talked about the team approach that Lheidli takes as you've been building what you need to do to support your community and really the region, right? You guys are symbiotic with Prince George and the surrounding communities, but just from your perspective, as you've been building that team, I don't imagine when DRIPA got introduced, you're like, oh, okay, now we've got it. You've built a team to achieve some goals. So maybe if you can just reflect on some of the goals that you guys have been trying to achieve over the last few years of your tenure.
Oh, many, many, many goals. We do little ones and big ones, but I have to say it's like the team. If we do get them in the room, we do get them to talk and stuff, and that's important. We need the communication, because like I said in my opening speech, that we need this room, everyone in this room. If we want to get anything done, we need everyone in this room to work together. So and well, with the DRIPA, like it's a good idea. It was, but there was no action on it, right? There's no real action on it. We talk about DRIPA, UNDRIP, Truth and Reconciliation. I remember when this is all coming through, BC was leading Canada. They were leading Canada in engaging with First Nations and stuff, and then that slowed down, and other provinces are moving forward faster. My personal beliefs, mine, is we shouldn't have a DRIPA or UNDRIPA and stuff. It should just be common knowledge. Come speak with the First Nations. We've been here for over thousands of years, and talk about natural resources. We've been protecting them for well over 9,000 years, and if I might talk about the Cowichan decision and stuff, it gets blown out of proportion, really out of proportion, because there's no real talking about it, explaining it. It's in very clear, like I tell them, those are your homes. No one's gonna take away your home. The only thing that's really gonna change is that you're gonna pay your land taxes and your whatever taxes. It goes to Cowichan. It just doesn't go to the city. And they're putting out their whole pile of legal jargon where I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand it. So it's getting twisted, and then it's getting twisted more and more and more. And First Nations aren't out here to take everything. Like, that's what I grew up with. First Nations get everything handed to them. Well, they don't. We work for what we get. And it's hard because it's you want to work with everybody, but you still get the pushback of like, oh, First Nations, right? But our goals are just like everybody else. We want to make sure everyone prospers. We want to make sure everyone has a home. This is tough. Like, I'm so excited this year. Like, we've got 7 new homes came in. They're moving in February, and that's huge for us. And if you look at it, it's huge for Prince George too, because we have 7 families moving into new homes, but that opens up 7 new homes in Prince George. Like, we all got to work hand in hand in all this, and it should just be common sense. We all work together, and it shouldn't have a piece of paper that say that we have to work together.
I think that's so realistic, and that's kind of what we need to get back to, is just having realistic discussions that take away that fear, because in the absence of communication, that's where that stuff fits in. And I think while Facebook and social media have been great for communication tools to keep people connected, the actual information that gets transferred through social media, it's kind of like the Moccasin Telegraph. It just gets filtered a little bit each time, you know? So I think that's something we need to do as First Nations people, is just start being a little bit clearer with people about what our intentions, objectives, and goals are, but also take the fear out of us achieving these goals isn't at the cost of somebody. Too many people think advancements in reconciliation come at the cost of somebody else, and that's not really how the process works. So, Kerry, you know, you guys are isolated is probably one way to put it. You and I were talking about the rural-urban divide, and I'm talking about it from, you know, I'm rural in Campbell River, where I'm a 35-minute plane ride from Vancouver, whereas you were telling me about your planes, trains, and automobiles episode just to get here. But how do you guys deal with this in your territory, where, you know, you guys are so huge? What was the numbers I saw? You're 11% of the mass of British Columbia through the Tahltan, you know, central government. Just what's some of your thoughts as you're there and you've got what's it called, the Golden Triangle?
Maybe you guys have heard of that here.
Yeah, so why don't you just give some of your perspective on that when it comes to getting specifically into, not precious minerals, what's the minerals? Critical minerals that are sort of the catchphrase for this stuff right now. But how does that fit with you as someone who's, you know, there, but the rhetoric and noise here, does it affect you guys?
Yeah, I think it's a huge process for Tahltans, right? And like, well, DRIPA especially is great for, I think it's great for Tahltans. And, you know, ideally, like Chief Logan had said, we shouldn't have to have a piece of paper to really outline that, and it should be common sense. But I think we're going to get there through that process, and with the roadmap that DRIPA is really kind of laying out for us, and how to get business done with Indigenous nations, because it's true, we don't want to come and take everything and, you know, limit access to the land and resources. You know, especially Tahltans are very open to that stuff and contributing to making the economy of Tahltan Nation and BC, and by extension Canada as well, really contributing to that, because in the end, how do we win is the tide that raises all the ships, right? We want everyone to win, and Tahltans are very much wanting to be a part of that. And, you know, as long as that happens, you know, with our input from the beginning and early, with, you know, using tools through DRIPA to actually make that happen, you know, I think we've come a long way from where we started, where resource projects would just kind of come in and be like, hey, FYI, we're going here to dig in your backyard and take some of these minerals or whatever it may be in terms of resources. But now I think we actually have some momentum here, and I think we should really make sure we keep walking this trail. You know, it's a dark trail, so we're like finding our way through this as we navigate it, because it is the first time a lot of this stuff is being done, so it's going to be kind of shaky at points. And, you know, but just to maintain that path forward together is how we're going to get things done and really move reconciliation and get to a point where we don't need pieces of paper to really tell us how to do these things. So, yeah, and with Tahltan territory, right, you said it's 11% of the province's land mass, so that equates to about the size of Portugal. So it's a huge territory, and we have 3 small main communities in there. So that's Telegraph Creek, Iskoot, and Dease Lake, where That's where I'm from, in East Lake. So there's a huge pressure with the critical conservation corridor that's being announced by Carney and the government there. So there's a huge spotlight on the Golden Triangle and resource development there. So Tahltans are very much kind of pushing a lot of those things, right? We have some of the first 2 consent decision-making agreements under the Section 7 of DRIPA in history. So I think that's pretty amazing for Tahltans, and we are working our way through that process. And actually Tahltans have completed the first step of that and actually gave our consent to the SK Creek project. So I think it's pretty impressive and pretty amazing to see as a nation that we're getting to that point where we actually have a say what happens on our land. So I'm very proud of that.
That's amazing. I mean, it's just so grounding to be one of the older First Nations leaders in the room now, where some of this stuff was pipe dreams. I think of when, Gordon Campbell came to power in 2001, and the first thing he did was brought the Nisga'a Treaty to referendum. I understood that was something he did just to take the fear out of his own caucus and show that British Columbians really wanted certainty and relationships with First Nations to men. But John, as a treaty nation, I know you have a bit more of a defined relationship now, but why don't you weigh on this a little bit?
Yeah, so in regards to, how should I say this? I think one thing that we need to continually remind ourselves is that no one's really going anywhere, right? That First Nations aren't going anywhere. We're not only people who live on the land as individuals, we're communities, and we see ourselves as such. And so that's markedly different than the understanding that you see in the comment sections of various social media, that First Nations are often characterized as just being a lobby group, or just 3% of the population, or. And it's awkward and it's wrong because it completely forgets the fact that we have collective rights, that the things that we do as communities are exercising our collective rights as communities within Canada under the Constitution. And so how we exercise those rights is that we sat down with the Crown governments and go, let's go through and make sure that we all understand what that actually means, because if it's not defined, it becomes scary. And so we did the long and hard work of defining who we are, how we make our decisions, who our leaders are, how we integrate our heritage, our culture, and our hereditary leaders into our decision making. All of the work that's necessary to have a government that can be respected. And as we got into being a treaty nation, we started to understand that a lot of the problems and challenges that exist in the rest of BC and Canada exist for Huu-ay-aht, and that we need to actually engage actively with everyone that we can to find solutions. We're not big enough to create solutions only for ourselves. I don't think any country, whether they be the US or China or whoever, is big enough to do that for themselves for very long, let alone Huu-ay-aht, let alone British Columbia. And therefore, if we're going to actually tackle the problems that we all share, we have to work together in a way that while it would be nice that we don't need pieces of paper to tell companies and governments to do a thing or not do a thing, the comment sections of Facebook's threads lead me to believe that we do need them. I'm sorry, but it's kind of a truism, right? That differentiation between an individualistic point of view and a community point of view, collective point of view, that's the main challenge that we have to surmount when it comes to talking about Indigenous rights and title. It's not that I hold those rights as the Chief Councillor, it's that we hold these rights as the Huu-ay-aht, and that is different. And I think we need to really focus on that. Sorry.
No, I think that's so true. I see some of the questions, and I'm going to sort of hybrid and blend them in a little bit just for time's sake, but to keep the discussion flowing. And it's my podcast, so I can do whatever the hell I want on it right now. So, sorry, Sarah. Just seeing if you're paying attention. You know, Chief Logan, you're talking about the team that you built, and you're building capacity, and you have different people to take on different, parts of the discussions for your goals that you're trying to achieve. How has your relationship with the provincial and federal governments change for the better or for the good? I mean, it's funny, the civil service is growing, but the actual results that we're getting from it are shrinking. And that's I don't know if it's only ironic to me, but we keep hiring more people, but we can't find someone in government to sit down and talk about these important issues with when it comes to a policy discussion or the development of a permit or something like that. So how does Clay Dene deal with, you just start doing stuff on your own and check in every once in a while, or how's your relationship with governments working?
Well, it's taken a lot of work. And I've said, like, friendships and partnerships, they go hand in hand, and you need the friendships. You need to be able to talk to the provincial, local MLAs, and Clayton Tene in the past 4 years, I think, has pushed, and I think we have an amazing relationship, especially with our local MLAs, with the city and regional district. The provincial ministers, like, if we phone them, we can meet them. They will come, we'll listen, we'll talk, have a discussion. Sometimes we both leave a little bit upset, but it's what happens, right? It's like, this is what a relationship is all about. You don't agree on everything, but you come back and willing to discuss it more. And the federal government, we're getting more and more, but like I said with like you said with elections really puts us in a huge turmoil for projects that we're having. Say if the federal election comes in, and then it's a whole new ministerial change, and then the provincial election comes in, and then it's a whole ministerial change again, and then you go, okay, so I got this new minister, okay, let's get them up to speed, let's do what we're gonna do, let them know what's happening, and then they do a shift. And then they shift into another minister, so we have to go update that minister. And then by the time that's all done, then it happens to be First Nations elections. It's never ending with elections, but unfortunately, there does have to be a mechanism for the federal and provincial mechanism for us, because if we're doing these major projects, we're trying to do major projects, and it's not just for us, not for Lheidli T'enneh, it's for the North. We're trying to keep everyone home and keep them working. But if we get a stop because there's an election, that's 6 months that holds us back. And then there's another election that holds us back another 6 months. And we're just trying to move forward. And I think you should take a policy. We don't actually have a policy on it, but Lheidli T'enneh, we don't make any major decisions within a few months of elections. But whatever is going on at that time will continue to move forward. Like, we don't put a stop to anything at our elections. We just keep moving forward because it's important for our future.
No, I really appreciate that in so many ways. And it's a good segue into the next discussion is, I don't even know if it's the role of our allies, but as Indigenous people, we built allies over the years in the resource sector. I think of some of the great partnerships that exist between personalities in companies and First Nations leaders that transcend into established institutional relationships that go beyond the personalities, and that's so important in the process to develop a major project or even a small project at the end of the day. But as Chief Jack referred to, social media in the comments section, our allies kind of hurt us more than they help us sometimes, because we go to these extremes. And I got caught myself just doing this ping pong from one side to the other, and there's so much more room in the middle for this. So Chief Jack, just some of your thoughts on this. You and I have talked about this a few times before too, but how does Huu-ay-aht manage that?
So how do we manage the ping pongs? Or?
Yeah, well, the ping pong or Fairy Creek.
Yeah. So
sorry, I said I wasn't going to go there on you, but
so
I called an audible.
When we're talking about allies, I think that's something that has often started on the personal scale, and I think that's something that we need to move into an institutional or organizational scale, because honestly speaking, resource sector companies are at the forefront of actually doing this the right way because you had to. But now it's second language for you. I don't think that's the same for an environmental NGO I think they assumed we would fall in line because, you know, why wouldn't they? And I think that's very awkward because I think it demonstrates a lack of understanding of the fact that you need to create an organization-to-organization relationship. That it's not just about knowing the chief councillor. It's about understanding what Hwayet is trying to do and how what you're bringing to the table will help us achieve our goals collectively and how our interests align. And I think there needs to be a level of sentimentality that is just kind of taken away from that conversation. That we do need to look at it from an organizational, paper-based conversation, because we need to demonstrate over time that these institutions can take over and we can trust them. And that if we can trust them and companies can trust them and the government can trust them, then maybe the media can actually report them correctly so that the people can trust them. And I really think that's the doing of it. And so what we need to do as First Nations is think in those terms, that it's not just enough for me to have a good personal relationship with Western CEO Stephen Hofer, that we need to create those things that will help our organizations move into the future after I'm gone, after Stephen's gone, and so on and so forth. That we need to identify our interests and work on those mutual common interests and demonstrate that it's not zero sum. That just because Hwayet is successful in achieving its aims, it doesn't take away from our neighbors in Bamfield. It doesn't take away from other First Nations or other people within British Columbia. And I think that's what scares me the most. I think that's something that we need to demonstrate as First Nations, that we can be a part of the positive sum game, the win-win-win sort of situation. But that's going to take some risk-taking on behalf of our communities. And that's scary for First Nations as much as it is people investing without guarantees. Because that's what half of this conversation at this convention has been about. We need guarantees to invest. No, you don't invest. Take the risk because that's how you actually benefit from it. And, where's Adrian? Oh, he left. Oh no, is he here? Create incentives so that it provides for people to invest in that relationship in both directions. Incentivize First Nations to have those conversations with resource sector. Incentivize decision makers within the resource sector to actually invest. But it's got to be risk in both directions or else it doesn't work. And I think that's some of the game theory problem that we're running into, is that somebody's waiting for the other one to move first, because it feels like first move is a disadvantage. And I don't think it is. But how do we incentivize everyone acting together at the same time? And I think that's diplomacy as much as it is math.
So good, so deep. I mean, yes, please. President Carlick, you know, you and I this morning were talking about the natural beauty of your territory from just a First Nations cultural connection to your land and your resources. But as we also mentioned, people want to dig shit up in your territory, right? You know, I see we got a question about Section 7, and you alluded to it a little bit in your opening comments, but why don't you take a shot at that and just the balance that you need to create? It's not just about getting a project approved, it's how do you approve a project that fits in line with your community vision, and how is Section 7 a tool that you guys have been using to try to go through that, knowing that it's in its infancy, but...
Yeah, like you said, it's very much in its infancy, and we're getting closer to working through that process. I think it's a very useful tool in demonstrating how two governments with different views and different systems and perspectives can work together to really have a common understanding and respect for each other and come to a robust decision. You know, it's the first time it's been done, so there's going to be some critiquing, I'm sure, after we fully go through the process and absorb what we just kind of did. I think, you know, it had meaningful collaboration with the province, which really helped our relationship develop. And as we've just discussed, like, relationship building is so key on this, and the respect and really working on something together and the flexibility that we were able to achieve with BC in this whole process. And yeah, it's still very fresh and still, you know, new to me as a new politician to kind of come in through this process, because it was 2022 when the first one was signed with Skeena. And so, yeah, very thankful and very kind of shout out to Skeena for walking with us on this journey to, to willing to be first. And I think it was there, Justin Himmelwright from Skeena that said that we're in a race to be first, right? You don't want to be the second. So that willingness to go and take the risk to actually go and do something new, I think was very brave on their part, and they took a gamble, and I think it's paying off. So very appreciative of that. So, that's taking the risk, and something I think, like Chief John was saying, like, take that risk, it'll pay off. Nothing's going to be certain, but if you take that risk, that's the only way you're going to get there. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to fully absorbing what we are going through right now, and then, sharing the learnings with all the other nations out there that will be, some are already kind of reaching out to ask how things are going with Section 7 and to get our insights on that. So once that's done, I'll be very happy to collaborate and work with other nations to share those learnings to help everyone here, because it's going to help industry to have a clear roadmap to getting their projects approved. It's going to help Canada, with their desire to really fast-track projects and see them done in shorter timelines and, rebuild our economy in a much stronger, resilient way in the nation. So that's going to help everyone, right? And that's what we want to do here. That's the goal of Section 7, right, is to make those processes more streamlined and have the clarity up front on how to engage with us in a respectful way. And yeah, again, those relationships are so important in the beginning to, meet us where we are and help us get there, because we're not asking for charity, we're asking for, assistance with this stuff to really be meaningful and like committed partners in this process.
Tremendous answer, and yes, please. The rookie's having a breakout game, I gotta tell you.
Is he a rookie or a ringer?
Oh, maybe.
It's getting bigger.
There's a good question here about the tools, and I think Section 7's obviously a tool that we can use. I think of other agreements that First Nations have. Treaties, obviously, are a tool. I think of strategic engagement agreements where we talk about the use of Crown land, air quotes, you guys get that one? For the listeners at home, I'm putting my fingers up in an air quote fashion. But there's these different agreements that we've been negotiating and evolving over the years that are tools. And maybe I'll take a shot at the strategic engagement. It's how we, deal with referrals and permits on Crown land. And there's a consultation process that has been redefined over the years since Delgamuuk, which brought the obligation to consult forward and present in our people's relationship. But one of the tools that the Strategic Engagement Agreement brought nations in my territory, Chief Chris Roberts, who's sitting in the front, used it to force Western forest products into a relationship with us. We were trying to work on a TFL discussion with them for a number of years. We got through some challenging old growth discussions. We were able to make some progress, but we couldn't actually build any partnerships. And so Chief Chris Roberts had the courage to say, you know what, I'm not going to sign off on your next TFL renewal until this relationship gets to the level that we portray it at publicly, but between us doesn't exist. And so that was a tool that was used to a point now where we own 38% of the largest TFL on Vancouver Island. In fact, between Huayet and the Four Nations in Lekwassamook, we're the biggest tenure holders probably in the province right now when it comes to, moving logs and getting things moving. But as we've developed and implemented those tools, it hasn't come at the cost of our environment. We've been able to introduce the conservation ideas and principles that have sustained us for those thousands of years into the development of these new businesses. And I say new businesses because they're new partnerships that have started that paradigm shift. We've been working at a paradigm shift in the forest industry for about 15 years now, and it's starting to get some traction. I know it's hard to see it because mills are closing. People are losing jobs, and that sucks. Because we've dealt with poverty, we've managed poverty, we know how that feels, and that's not something we want to bring to our neighbors in other local communities. But using these tools are so important to make sure that these discussions continue to evolve, because when they work, the regional benefits are regional. When a First Nations company is successful, it brings economic certainty to that region. It's not to, as I steal a line from my brother John, it's not to shareholders in Boston or Toronto or London. This is money and capital that gets reinvested throughout our communities, and the spin-off effect and the symbiotic relationship we're building with local communities, we're starting to understand that a little bit better. So just some of your thoughts on that, Chief Jack. I know you, again, have talked about this ad nauseum, but...
Yeah, I think one thing that's important for me to have everyone here know is that when Indigenous communities set up their own economic development initiatives, and when they start getting involved in natural resource projects, this isn't something where the money is going to some random bank account for some random shareholder. In Hawaii, the money that we get from economic development goes to pay for things like clinical counselors, goes to pay for things like early childhood educators, helps us address the impacts of colonization and poverty and how those things kind of move together in this death spiral. And so we, as a nation, know that we cannot depend on the Crown government to help us catch up and keep up. And therefore, we have to help create value in the market and share in that value. And so it is one of those reciprocal relationships where we have to demonstrate our understanding of the situation in forestry, our place in it, and what it is we need to do to help create value. And so that's what we bring to the table. What we need to see back are things that need to be facilitated by people who are listening to us now, but also people in the federal and provincial governments. And so those things really matter because we will only be able to create this value if we understand one another, that the creation of value at the margins will be predicated not on technology, but on our ability to communicate clearly and have a relationship that outlasts individual lives or careers. And I don't think we focus on that enough.
You know, Chief Logan, as Prince George is sort of, well, this week it's the center of the universe when it comes to resource management and resource development and sustainable resource management. I think it shouldn't have to be said because everybody in this room knows that sustainability is the key to long-term resource development. But just some of your thoughts as your nation has gotten more hands-on with everything. But, you know, what is your vision on the next steps as we start to, you know, the tide's going to come back up? And we're not going to be, you know, dealing with all the challenges that we're dealing with right now. But what do you see over the next couple of years for Lheidli Dene and their relationships with not only your land and resources, but the people who occupy them?
Oh, big one. Plans for the next few over our resources. Well, for one, we have to be very careful with them. They're not building more, like you said, with lands. They're not making more. But you brought up forestry. And this will be my pride moment. So we've had a company that we've had over 25 years, and we were partnered. So like everybody else, we didn't know forestry. So at that time, we partnered up with somebody who did know forestry. So it's 5 years ago, our council and our town board got together and said, we're going to buy our own, we're going to buy them out. This is our company. So we were 100% owned by Lheidli Dene. And since then, in the 5 years, we have changed a lot. And it's a lot to Lheidli's vision and Glenn Bjorklund, our LTN contracting manager. So we've changed the way of how we log. It's because it's our resources. So just last month, Glenn was telling me he goes up and does spot checks on where they're logging and stuff. And he goes, it's so good to see, because to watch the skidder operators and the loader operators, because they used to run over trees this big, right? Not even think twice, just run it over, go get that big piece, the big money piece. But now he goes out there and he sees them, he goes, they're driving around it. They're driving around it. And then last year, we signed a contract with RBS. We call it slash to sash. So anything from the burn piles that used to just be burnt and gone, we're taking them, bringing them in, and it's getting turned into aviation fuel. So this is like, that's like, if you would have asked our logging company that 10 years ago, even 6 years ago, they would have laughed at us. But this is the change that with Glenn's hard work and the Claytley's vision is how we're changing, how we're moving forward, and also protecting our resources. So the future for us is bright. I always think if it's a positive. I was at a panel one time and they asked me about failures. They said, well, can you tell us about one of your failures? And my reply was, we don't fail. We learn from, that first attempt at success didn't work. We learned from that. We learned what worked, what didn't work, and then we're to take what worked and move forward. So.
Well put, well put, well put. I see the question on the Kakatla decision, and we've seen this a few times where a couple decisions have started pointing out some of the obvious. You know, obviously, if it's gotten to a point where there's a court decision made, it's being discussed for quite a while before it's gotten to that point. But every time one of these decisions come out, the fear starts up again, and it's understandable because we're making investments in opportunities that become a little bit gray when the courts get involved. And so just some of my preliminary thoughts on that are, let's not end up in court. For one thing, let's try work through some of those things. And I think that's one of the good things, again, about this conference is it's taught us all how to do this. There's no guidebook for this. You know, it's only plagiarism in college. If we share the stories of how Section 7 works, we're going to start using it and we're going to refine it to work for our territories in that. So I think the shared knowledge among First Nations people does really go a step in the right direction, but then it has to go and get shared at forums like this. You know, in my early part of my career in the Great Bear Rainforest, we were caught in a tug of war between the environmentalists and the forest companies, and no one really asked me what I thought. They asked me what I thought about what they were doing. And it took years before we were able to build the strategic plans to help inform those discussions. But the reason I bring that up is because we're about balance. Every First Nations leader in the province, they're not pro-development, they're not pro-conservation, they're pro their community. And it's that balance that has sustained us for 14,000 to 8,000 to 9,000 years. And this isn't mythological rhetoric. This is carbon dating that has showed Indigenous people have been on North America for up to 14,000 years now. And so reintroducing some of those values of sustainability that got us to this point really need to be reintroduced into some of these discussions right now. But I see time is just the enemy of a really good discussion, but that's another great thing about this conference is this discussion just keeps going on, and we don't have to look back because we pick up right where we left off. But maybe I'll ask each of you just to give a few closing comments, and I really like the question about mentors in leadership. So maybe if you can just give some closing comments and just identify one person who really just helped strike that part in your heart that makes you want to do this, because this isn't easy shit. It's not easy to be caught in the middle of these crossfires that are happening here. But First Nations have gotten so courageous, and they've taken that cultural connection, that rights and title that we've always known we've had, and we built spatial land use plans around it. So maybe as you guys do your closing comment, you can just name one mentor who's helped you along the way, and we'll start with Chief Logan.
Okay, for a point, I gotta say, I know my perspective, but John, I'd like to hear what you have to say. So, I had to do that for a point. I got 1 point, so I win. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, my one mentor, I don't think I could put it into one.
That's true.
I can't. There's been so many great leaders ahead of me, and just, if it would be, it would have to be my mom. Sorry. She's a residential school survivor, and she had a hard life. But right to the end, she was a very strong woman, so I love that lady.
Well said.
I think like a lot of folks, there were a lot of people who influenced my life. I think the person that I would pick, if I had to pick anybody, would be someone from the north who lives in the north now. Her name is Angela Wesley. She's lives in Terrace. She's Hoyt. Someone who helped me understand the importance of treaty, the importance of good governance. Somebody who showed me that even if something doesn't say you can't do it, it means you can do a lot more, right? It helped open my eyes up to the possibilities and to embrace creativity in finding solutions rather than looking for the boundaries. And so Angela Wesley is someone who is constantly on my mind because she helped me really appreciate the possibilities and the potential that we all have working together.
And for myself, as a new leader, I think coming into this, in terms of leadership mentor, I think definitely for me, it's Chief Marie Kwok of the Iskoot Band Council. She's been a long time our chief of that band. You know, she started from right at the bottom and worked her way up to be chief, and she's someone that's I really admire in her determination, her consistency, and the love that she has for her community. And she's been a very, very big mentor for me in this new role, and as well as Chief Jackson as well, but especially Marie. She follows her heart with her leadership, and I know she had mentioned that at one of the MOU signing with the First Nations Health Authority in Vancouver, and she had really said some nice words about me in terms of me following my heart and being a leader that leads from his heart. And it definitely almost made me choke up in the meeting there, so that was really special. And I kind of call her my leadership mom because one of the architects of the new school, this beautiful school that was built in Iskoot, I was standing beside Marie and she came up and was like, "Oh, is this your son?" And so I was like, so since then, I'm like, every time I see her, I call her mom. So I'm very happy to have her in my life with that stuff. And then I guess just another mentor, I guess just to add one more, has been Gabor Mate. So in terms of trauma, right, as Indigenous people, we have a lot of generational trauma that's been instilled in us, and something that I make really important, and that's, I think, was a big part of my campaign of getting in is wellness and healing. And so really looking at the world through the lens of trauma and understanding people, right, and not taking things in the Facebook comment section and all that kind of stuff to heart, which is, something we all deal with as First Nations leadership. So yeah, those are kind of my heroes and mentors for my role in leadership.
Tremendous. Myself, my dad has been chief of our community since 1982. And so from a very young age, I got to travel with him to different conferences and events. And I got to travel with Bill Wilson, who just recently left us a little bit while. And Bill, I was his driver when he was our treaty negotiator back in our communities. And I got to spend a lot of quality time with Bill Wilson. And I'm gonna channel him right now a little bit. And if you're offended, I'm sorry. But there's some truths out there that I just want to make clear from my own personal perspective. If land acknowledgements make you that much comfortable that you want to build a piece of legislation to get rid of it, you're in the wrong job. And we are paying attention. We're watching what's going on, and we're building relationships with all the parties, but the direction that BC is going in on the fringe side of these things is something that's not going unnoticed in First Nations communities. We've spent far too much time, far too much heartache. We've buried way too many people trying to solve some of these problems to take a step backwards like is being proposed by some elected provincial representatives right now. And that doesn't mean I don't want to talk to people like that. I want to talk to whoever wants to have a discussion about what's happening in my territories. But there's some ground rules and some respect that have to be part of that discussion before you can walk in our door and tell us or recommend to us how you think our territory should be managed. So I don't usually go dark like that. Usually I'm pretty fun-loving, but that's something that's been bugging me for a few months now, and I've gotten caught up in the comments section, and every once in a while I'll get a text from about 12 o'clock at night, and John says, "Put your goddamn phone down, bro."
Dial it down a notch. It's okay.
You're okay, you're okay. But I just want to thank you all. Like I said, when we decided to have this panel, we weren't quite sure what we were going to do, but this was a very important conversation, and I really appreciate you in attendance who are here, those are online that are watching, and those are going to see this on the Rez Dog Walkers podcast. So with that, Kayla Kasla to everybody have safe travels, and let's just keep working at it.
Oh.
Thank you so much, Dallas, Chief Logan, Chief John, and President Carlick for such a fantastic session. We are truly grateful for your leadership and for your words to us today. Please accept a small thank you gift following a photo from our wonderful photographer. We hope that you've enjoyed this special taping of the Rez Dog Walkers podcast. Please be sure to check out the Rez Dog Walkers podcast wherever you stream your podcasts. This one will be available on there. And that concludes our luncheon program.